Welcome to another episode of She's Got Gumption. I'm Wendy J. Olson, and welcome to a new series for your summer season. Our music has been graciously provided by Brett and Emily Mills of Jesus Said Love in Waco, Texas, off their album, Never Too Far. This summer, we'll be diving into a series I like to call Things We Can't Talk About in Church. We're going in deep and having some tough conversations. Let's put on our boots and walk through this together. Let's chat. You know, every time I email you, I just want to call you and be like, Jacqueline T. Hooks.
I know. I have the world's longest email address. It might be annoying.
Well, you said that your husband set that up for you a few years ago, right? Which
Yes.
is why it's that long.
That's why it's like the world's longest email address. And I'm like, somebody recently was like, you know, you could change it. And I was like, I'd never actually thought of that. And so, but it's like the phone number that I've had since I lived in Arlington. And I'm like, do you change it or do you just leave it?
No.
So maybe you just leave it. I don't know.
I just leave mine until, I don't know, I guess people that call me that I don't want to call me keep calling and I can't block them, you know?
Didn't you change it?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, but I'm not on the lam anymore. So, you know, I've had this number for like 10 years. That's like a record for me.
Yes, I've had mine for a super long time too, but the email address as well. I've had it for several years now. And I'm like, do I just keep going on with it and be like, don't forget the T, sorry.
It's just your thing.
Yeah,
like,
it is.
Well, I'm really glad that we could do this and have this chat on this series, Things We Can't Talk About in Church. Can you give everyone just like the 5-minute cliff notes of who Jackie Hooks is, what your middle name is? No, I'm kidding.
Right.
And all that good stuff.
5-minute cliff notes on who I am. I'm Jackie Hooks. I am a high school teacher. I just took a new job teaching in a high school. And I am a writer and a speaker. I have a Facebook Live show that I do twice a week on Wednesday nights at 9:30 Central Standard Time. I tell a story because I am a storyteller. It took me a long time to land in that space and realize I'm a storyteller, and that's okay because Jesus was a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be something better than that, but clearly I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. And then on Sunday nights at 9:30 Central Standard Time, I have a Facebook Live show as well where I interview ordinary people, and I just have topics that we go through every month is pretty much how often they change. And you can find me at Jackie Hooks, the most ordinary girl in the world. And I think really that's what I am. I am the most ordinary girl in the world. I am the person that lives next door to you. I have 4 kids. We are constantly living paycheck to paycheck. There's always more month than there is money. We eat nothing organic. I wish we did, but we can't afford it. All of my kids are like, all I'm trying to do is not raise assholes. All my kids are halfway decent. We are not the people who win awards. We are the people who look just like you. I'm the gal who's constantly trying to lose weight, but I like bread and queso. I'm the gal that constantly is waking up late and trying to see how many days I can go without washing my super long hair that is colored red that I color in my own sink. So I am the most ordinary girl in the world. I have 2 dogs. They're both kind of unruly. We don't get to do trainers here in my house. And I'm just the person doing the best that they can who happens to love the living daylights out of Jesus. And that has never changed. My ordinary life changes all the time because that's how life goes. But I have never, ever, ever stopped loving Jesus since he found us about 10 years ago.
Which I love because when I first met you, I felt like you gave me permission to love Jesus in that way. It was different. It was eye-opening. I always tell you that you changed my life and my faith.
Thank you. I don't think I meant to. I think I can't stop being myself. I told the people I work with yesterday when I said goodbye to my elementary school position, I told them, I said, thanks for kind of hanging out with like your drunk aunt that wears too many bracelets and really loves Jesus. So that's kind of, maybe that's my personality. I don't know.
At least it has a type though, like you can name it. Where sometimes
Right.
I'm just like my kids are weird. And when people say, well, what do you mean by weird? I'm like, I don't know. You'd have to know them. They're both really weird, which I guess in turn means me and Matt are weird. So there you go.
I mean, it's all good, but I think really what we end up finding out in the end or at some point is that there is a space in all of us, whether we are girls or boys or big or little, that are 13-year-old kids going to a middle school dance and shit, we wore the wrong thing. Like, I think that's how we are walking through life the majority of the time, is with that feeling inside of, we were going to the dance. We were so excited. We showed up. We were kind of nervous and shit, it wasn't a costume ball.
That's a good analogy for life. I'm going to have to remember that because
yes, remember it. It helps me on occasion.
Put that on a t-shirt and sell it. Like that's golden right there. I love it. Well, so what we're talking about today is the subject, which you're well versed in. Apparently, you've been talking about a lot lately on your show. And it's something that you've definitely dealt with in your life. We're talking about grief and loss and why it's something, one of those things that we just can't talk about in church. I feel like, and I mentioned this to you before too, people think grief has a timetable. And I really think that you can speak to that. Can you kind of give us the rundown on why you think it's just so hard to talk about and deal with?
I think it's there's layers to this. But part of it is this myth and this lie that we think comes from the Bible that says everything happens for a reason. And sometimes things just happen. Sometimes life is just hard. And that thing of like everything happens for a reason, I think that makes us believe that we are supposed to be okay with everything that happens. That if everything has a reason for happening, then we just have to be okay with it. And that's not how grief enters into our life. I don't think that anyone that I've interviewed recently on my show talking about grief, I have a friend who, when she was 24 years old, her dad committed suicide. And days before he killed himself, she said to him, if you don't start making different choices, I'm going to have to remove myself from your life.
Wow.
And then days later, he would kill himself. Then we have the brother who died of a drug overdose, and who his brother, the last time that he had the opportunity to talk to him, was really mad at his drug addicted brother for making horrible choices, and chose not to speak to him, and he would never speak to him again. And then we have the wife whose husband was a minister. He was a children's minister. They were these good people, and he gets a horrible, rare form of throat cancer and dies. And all the people around her would not let her speak her frustration, because if you speak it, you're speaking it into, like, your faith isn't strong enough. You're speaking it into being, because they went to a kind of Pentecostal-y church.
Yeah.
And so I think we have this theory that we let run rampant, this myth, this lie, whatever you want to call it, in church, that is everything happens for a reason. But the underbelly of that and the other side of that is, so if everything happens for a reason, then we have to be okay with it happening. And I think that's just not where grief enters into our life. Grief enters into our life and it levels us. It knocks us off our feet. It shocks us. Grief is always unexpected. It never discriminates. It comes walking into our life on an ordinary Tuesday and reminds us how fragile we are. And then the thought that it has a timeline, because we're supposed to be okay with everything happening for a reason, so we have to be okay that it happened, means that you got to shore your shit up. Yeah. Like at some point soon, whether that's a month or a year, you better be able to talk about it and use terms like the joy of the Lord, and I just found joy in my sorrow. And you've got to be writing songs like "It Is Well With My Soul" all over your life, or then you're not okay with God. And I think that that's just not the truth of it, because sometimes things just happen, and where we find Jesus is that he just meets us in the happening,
Mm.
that he can't change it, that he can't end it, that we can't rewrite it, but he just meets us in the happening.
I feel like one of the truest statements to like sum up life is shit happens.
Yes.
Right? It's simple. It applies to everything. You're grieving. He grieved before you grieved, and he's with you in your grieving.
Well, I think so for me, I have a little jar that sits on my entryway. And it sits with all my pictures of my children. And it's a little jar, and it says that he catches all our tears. And that to me has come to mean so much, because I think one of the hardest pieces of grief is that at some point people leave your grieving. Mm-hmm. At some point people here on earth leave your grieving, because the unfortunate part about life is that it does go on. And so you have this Jesus who is just sitting there catching your tears, like he can't change it. He can't rewrite it, but he can still continue to sit with you like he never leaves. And so when you feel like the foolish woman who is sitting in an HEB parking lot 3 years later after, tragedy walked into your life, he still climbs into the passenger seat with you and doesn't ask you why you're crying and doesn't tell you to get over it or to get on with it or to get it together. He's just that Jesus that is like, let me hand you a tissue and sit next to you. And I think that I don't want to use the word comforting, because sometimes I don't feel comforted by it.
Right.
But I definitely think that it makes Jesus a badass, because those are the moments when no one else is there, that he just like climbs on in again and again and again and again. And sometimes grace and mercy from Jesus to me have looked so much more like him just not questioning why I'm having a mental breakdown.
Do you think that people on the outside are expecting this to only go on for so long, and that is because they're uncomfortable with it and they can only give you so much allowance of that?
So my grandmother, her name was Mary, lost her son, Lanny. She lost him in a tragic car accident where his wife was driving, and he died, and the people in the other car, it was just this huge tragedy. He was a young pastor. He was going to go preach a sermon, and he was this nice kid. And my grandmother was just leveled by his grief, leveled by it. And she would, every Christmas for the rest of her life, this happened in the early 70s. And for the rest of her life, she would light candles in the window every Christmas. She talked about him. It would take her a decade before she really came out of that depression. And even the people who loved her, I think at some point became annoyed with it, that like she couldn't get up from it. And so that was the story that I'd heard, was that, and then it just like consumed her. This grief consumed her. She would end up opening a chapter of Compassionate Friends up in Illinois and go and meet with other families that are dealing with loss, and really live out the rest of her life, the rest of her decades doing that, and helping people through their grief and remembering the people that were lost. But my experience with that was just the annoyance of the people around her, of like, oh my gosh, Mary, get on with your life. And she never did. So that was just like a story in my life until, in 2016, my husband and I lost our son, James. And when that happened, he had not even breathed a breath on this earth before he was gone. Experiencing the last 3 years of being caught off guard by grief, to be very honest with you, when people post about their rainbow babies or their miracle babies that came after a miscarriage, my heart hurts so bad. And I find myself flipping off Facebook on occasion, like that it is still that tangible, that it still hurts that bad after all this time. And, granted, it's just 3 years. I feel like I understand how my grandmother could be so leveled by that tragedy for the rest of her life. Because it lets you see people who are grieving in a new way, and not try to stop their grief or their pain from happening, because it just is what it is.
Do you believe that in grief there are mile markers?
I don't know. Sometimes lately it's felt like just a circle. Like we are just walking in this same strange circle all of a sudden again. The other day, literally, I was just in the bathroom about to go to bed. And all of a sudden it occurred to me that that he would be 3. It occurred to me that I would be putting to bed a 3-year-old and fighting through potty training, and the tired that only comes from raising a toddler, and that Josh, I had just finished putting Josh to bed, that Josh would be a big brother and like maybe he would share a room. And so I think sometimes grief isn't just about like, oh, it's been a year, oh, it's been 2 years, oh, it's been 3 years. It's also so much mourning of what would have been and what could have been. And so every birthday is a kick in the teeth. Every, I assume for other parents, every graduation ceremony, every going to a wedding and thinking about what you should be doing. I don't know, sometimes it just feels like this circle that all of a sudden you find yourself walking in for 15 minutes or for an afternoon or for a day. So are there mile markers? I think where I stand right now in my own personal experience, I still feel completely caught off guard by them, if that's what they are.
While grief is such a personal experience, loss, everybody has a different experience in their grief, whatever they've lost or are grieving through. What are some of the commonalities that you're finding with other people that are going through the same things?
I think from everybody I've talked to on my show, it is honestly like people tell you, and I said this recently, that grief is a process. Like books will tell you grieving is a process, that you'll go through anger and sadness and all these different steps and layers, and then you finally get to acceptance. I think that is just kind of a bullshitty way to say like grief is just always with you. I think the commonality is for all the people I've talked to is that you really just learn how to walk in pain. You really do just learn how to walk with a limp. And sometimes you're running a marathon with a limp that people barely notice, but it's still there because you know it's there. I think that would be the overarching theme, is that you can call it a process because that dresses it up pretty. But the truth of the matter is it's just with you, and it catches you off guard.
I mean, to that, you could just be, well, life is a process. We're all overcoming something in our lives. I mean, it almost sounds like people should take it as a step by step. And once we get through these 12 steps, we'll be okay. And that's just not the reality.
I think that is too what you're hoping.
Oh, yeah.
Like what I personally am hoping is that people say things too, like time, heals all wounds and stuff like that. I think you just get better at walking with what you have. So for example, if tomorrow you had to walk with a cane starting tomorrow for the rest of your life, well, for a while you would be tripped up by that. For a while, navigating stairs would feel weird. Walking fast might feel weird. Walking the dog would be hard because now you walk with a cane. But after, tons of years, after decades, you walk pretty damn well with a cane. You walk pretty well. You can do stairs. You can run if you need to. You know how to throw it over your shoulder and grab a bag of groceries. You know how to hobble and people don't even see the cane as much. Like, you know what you're doing. And I think that is something that we forget, is that really it's not so much that time heals all wounds. It's that we just learn how to walk better with what we've been given. So that's kind of my thought on that.
I have to say I agree with that, because I don't believe that just because we put time and space between something means that it is healed. I believe we have to go back intentionally into those wounded places and seek out healing for those moments, because I can be driving down the road 15 years removed from a sexual assault and still instantly feel fear when a man approaches that looks similar to my perpetrator. Right. So
Right.
I'm not healed of that hurt at all. It's still fresh. It's still just right there. Just scratch a little. It's right beneath the surface. And I feel like, I don't know, I guess grief is very similar to that. I lost my grandpa just over 10 years ago, and still, I mean, I thought 10 years, this is going to be the mile marker I've been waiting on. No, like I hear old Miranda Lambert song on the radio, tears, Mom, why are you crying? You know, I mean, it's still just right there with you, like in the passenger seat.
Yes, I absolutely 100% agree. And I think that comes under the bigger umbrella of how do we live with trauma? Mm-hmm. And grief is under that umbrella because all of us were sidelined by it. Everybody who's walking through grief and loss was sidelined. It caught you off guard. You weren't expecting it. You woke up one day, everything was okay. And by the time you went to bed, your life would always exist as a before and after story.
Yes. The time before this happened and everything else. I wholeheartedly agree. What is something that I guess that you would like to share that are like those things that people say that you're like, please don't say this to somebody who is grieving?
So here's the big one. Please don't say everything happens for a reason. Sometimes things just happen, and people never want to hear that. Like, especially in the loss of a family member or a dear friend, please, please, please don't say everything happens for a reason. And if people want to, like, sometimes I think people get scared of what do I do? How do I talk to them? What do I say? Show up. Show up with a pie and a fork. My friend Shannon showed up with a pie and a fork and a bottle of wine. That's what it was. And it was delightful. Don't be afraid if you make me laugh. Don't be afraid of those first few minutes. And don't be afraid of a year later. A year later, we didn't forget what happened. But number one, everything happens for a reason. And number two, this is a big one. Please, please stop yourself before you mail the book on grief. Stop yourself before you put in the mail, drop off on the porch, the book on how to grieve or grieving or whatever it may be. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. They are not ready. They will buy it when they are. Don't be afraid, however, on the flip side of that, to encourage your friend to go to counseling. Therapy was instant for me. A week into grief and I was in therapy. And it was a lifesaver, like, to walk through that. So don't be afraid to step in, but really, truly, shy so far away from everything happens for a reason, and shy so far away from mailing the book on grief. I can't read a book on grief when I just stepped in to unexpected loss and tragedy. So those are the big ones for me. I have a friend right now who has cancer, and her prognosis is pretty horrible. And someone handed her a book on how to die.
Wow.
And she was like, whoa, what the fuck? That's for me to buy. That's not for you to give. So anyways, those things, I think people always mean well. And then just show up. And remember this, if you're like, I don't know if I should go to the funeral. I didn't know her spouse, child, friend, whatever. Remember this, your presence may not make a difference. You might stand in a long line and give a hug, but people will not forget that you showed up. They will not forget that you showed up. You do not have to have words. Hugs are fine. But if you are on the fence of whether or not you should go. People will remember if you didn't show up and you were supposed to. So those are the things.
And I think people do those things. I mean, we've all done them, right? We're all guilty. We're not, perfect. We've all made mistakes and overstepped our bounds or whatever. But I think people do that as a way to protect themselves and like offer the buffer, right? Because they don't want to fully offer themselves because it's an uncomfortable space. But really, we need to get in with each other and get really uncomfortable and just be in close quarters. We don't need to have the right words. We just need to sit in awkward silence together.
Yeah, and no one expects you to have the right words.
Right. If anybody ever had the right words, I'm pretty sure they would have sewn it on a t-shirt and sold it on eBay.
Right.
But
it would be on throw pillows everywhere.
Right. But we don't have that. And I think the quote unquote right words for each person would be completely different anyway.
I completely agree.
So wrapping up this conversation of things we can't talk about in church, talking about grief and loss, what is one last thing you want to say about that?
This is a great, I truly believe this. If you've not experienced tremendous grief, you will. This is the non-discriminating factor that is coming for all of us at some point. Remember that Jesus doesn't hate you. It didn't happen because you failed. This didn't happen because you're being punished. God loves you. He so tremendously loves you, and life is really hard, and loss is part of life. It's just the truth. Don't be afraid to go to counseling. My goodness gracious, we cannot walk through grief alone. We cannot. It's not possible. I begged my counselor to put me on medication, and she wouldn't. I was like, please, I feel like I can't breathe. And she was like, but you're getting up every morning and you're making breakfast for your kids. You're going to walk through this. And that was actually the truth. I was going to live through being leveled. And know that you will never be the same. Know that you will look at life in a totally different way. That you will see your children and the people you love as the most enormous treasures. That there will be times that your boss will tell you you have an unexpected meeting and you'll be like, I'm not going because I'm going to a football game, or I'm going home because my kid had a bad day. Like, you will feel free to say the things that you will not do so that you can be with the people that you do love. And you will laugh again. You will. You will laugh. You will laugh till you cry again, and you will keep walking. But you will always, always have a limp, and you will get good at walking with a limp, but you will know it's there. And there will come a day when no one else remembers it's there, but you will. And that is still okay. That is still okay. We do not have to wrap up our grief for eternity in smiles. That's not what we're meant to do. That's just not what we're meant to do.
Thank you, Jackie, for always being willing to be a part of hard conversations and say hard things and be honest and just brutally honest. And I love, you know how much I love you anyway. I don't have to tell you, but I will. I love you. You are working on an event. You have an event coming up. Can you talk to people about that?
Yes, we have an event here in Buda, Texas. That's where I live. It's like a little bit south of Austin. And we just decided that hey, there's still a message to be given to all the ordinary people. So we are having the Ordinary Jesus workshop here. And it is June 28th and 29th, and it's going to get kicked off with a big family style dinner in my backyard, which is 3 acres. And we're going to eat some tacos and drink some beer-garitas and build community. The event costs $25 because ordinary people can't afford more than that. And I'm an ordinary person, so I'm always going to look out for my people. And we're literally just going to be inspired and reminded that Jesus has a purpose for our ordinary lives, and it is Him that makes them extraordinary. And we are going to laugh and have fun and remember that there is a plan and a purpose for all of us who are worried about packing school lunches and worried about buying picture packages and worried about if we're going to be able to buy new shoes when our kids need them, not just when they want them. And when buying bathing suits feels like an astronomical expense every summer, I want you to know that there's a place for you and that you are not alone, that the majority of us are just ordinary people.
I love it. I'll be there. And I'm bringing my best friend. She's meeting me from Houston there. I was like, this is going to be our summer girl getaway. Pack your stuff. Let's go.
It's going to be good. I promise. It's going to be really good.
My favorite things about Jackie is her commitment to no bullshit. And while the conversation wrapped around grief can be awkward and uncomfortable, she doesn't mind getting in and helping people understand what no one else will say. Be sure to check out her event that is coming up on June 28th and 29th. Like I said, I'll be there and I'll have my podcast microphone with me. If you're in or around the Austin area, or you just want to come down and see us, buy a ticket, come on down, let's go. Follow Jackie on all the social media platforms and watch her lives on Facebook. Jackie Hooks, the most ordinary girl in the world. If you'd like to hear Jackie's Jesus story, tune back to episode 4, where Jackie shares more in depth what her life has been mired by and how Jesus has shaped the way she lives today. If you want to catch up with me between podcast episodes, you can always find me on Instagram at MRS Mrs. Wendy J. Olson, OLSON. I'm also doing a blog series of this same name, Things We Can't Talk About in Church, on other subjects as well. You can find the blog at wendyjolson.com. Thanks again for listening. We hope you're enjoying this summer series as much as we are. Make sure you subscribe, and if you haven't already, we'd love it if you'd take a minute and leave us a review. We'd also love 5 stars. So tell us what you're loving. See y'all back next week.